My view of the road became increasingly obscured as the fog enveloped my car. I flipped my wipers on, but they only helped so much. Just a few seconds after entering the fog bank, I could no longer see the endless fields and hills around me. There was only a few feet of the road ahead of me to focus on. At that point, I was already running low on gas, and the fog added another thing to worry about. I leaned forward in my seat, mentally willing the fog away. This had no effect, however, and I just prayed I would be able to see a gas station if I passed one. I drove in silence for some time, but eventually turned the radio on. All I got, though, was static on AM and FM. That was upsetting, but then I remembered I had CDs in the glove compartment. I bent down to open it, trying not to take my eyes off of the road, and fumbled around for a CD case. My finger had just brushed the top of one when I noticed the fog darken dramatically in the road ahead of me. The thought that someone had stopped in the middle of the road and I was about to hit them frightened me, and I slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt, and all of my CDs fell from the glove compartment to the floor. I peered ahead at the dark shape in the fog, but as quickly as it had appeared, it disappeared. I was left clueless as to what it had been. I took a moment to catch my breath, and then pressed on the gas and slowly moved forward. As I did so, I noticed something glowing up ahead on the side of the road. I rolled closer and saw that it was a neon sign standing 20 feet tall. The sign read, "Parker's One Stop." A gas station. Thank God. I approached and rolled into the parking lot just as the car alerted me that it was running on empty. Pulling up to a pump, I parked it and stepped out into the fog. What a lucky break. A sticker on the pump read, "Please prepay inside." So I locked my doors and strolled across the parking lot to the building. It was in typical shape for a gas station out in the middle of nowhere. The walls outside were stained from years of weather, and a line of green paint which ran the length of the top of the building was chipped and peeling. The smaller green neon sign which hung above the door looked brand new, however, and cut through the fog like a knife. Parker's One Stop wanted to make sure everyone noticed it. Pushing the glass door at the front of the store open and stepping inside, a little bell announced my presence. A young blond man wearing a bright green polo stood at the counter a few feet from me and looked up. He smiled pleasantly and asked, "What can I do for you?" "I just need to pay for some gas," I replied as I approached the counter. "Oh, of course. Nasty day out there, isn't it?" he noted. "Yeah, I can barely see 5 feet in front of me," I agreed. "Hopefully it'll clear up soon." "I wouldn't count on it. Around here the fog can last all day sometimes." "I can still hope," I said with a smile. The young man at the counter smiled back and asked, "Which pump?" "2. I pulled my wallet from my pocket, handing him my credit card, and then I happened to notice his name tag. "Parker?" I asked. "Is the store named after you?" "It's named after me, and I'm named after it," he laughed. "You might as well call me Parker's One Stop. The store and I are one." "It's a nice place," I replied, trying to match his enthusiasm. He smiled hugely and handed me back my card, leaving his hand outstretched as if he wanted me to shake it. I grasped it and said, "Well, have a good one." He quickly let go and quipped, "You too. Come back now, you hear?" I chuckled and waved as I walked back to the door. I pushed on the handle, but it didn't budge. Then I tried pulling. That didn't work either. Finally, I looked back at Parker for help. I was slightly unnerved, though, when I saw that he had his hand on his nose as if he were smelling it. When he noticed me looking, Parker lowered his hand away from his face, pointed over the counter, and explained, "Sometimes it gets stuck. Just push harder." I did as he said and leaned into the door. It gave way at last, and I turned around to thank the helpful cashier. But Parker was gone. I glanced around the store but didn't see him anywhere. I guessed he must have gone into the back room behind the counter or something. Oh well, he seemed like a bit of a strange one anyway. After leaving the store, I went back to my car and filled it up. I had hoped that the fog would clear up while I was inside, but that hadn't happened. It was still just as thick as it had been before. Parker had probably been right. The fog was there to stay. I drove out of the parking lot and watched Parker's One Stop fade away behind me. I lamented that it was probably the last thing I was going to see, other than black asphalt, for some time. I hadn't gone more than a few hundred feet when I suddenly felt the car shake violently. Alarmed, alarmed, I slowed down. The shaking subsided after a moment, but I continued to feel smaller rumbles which gradually increased in intensity and then diminished as more time went on. When at last the shaking had stopped completely, I pulled over to think. Had it been my car shaking, or some kind of earthquake? The car seemed fine now, so the latter idea seemed the most likely. I had never felt anything like that before, though. Strange. I pulled back onto the road and continued my drive. A few minutes later, I was once again considering putting on a CD when the car suddenly jolted and I almost jumped out of my seat. Had I run over something? I glanced in my mirrors and saw a gigantic pothole disappearing into the fog behind me. Was it too much to ask to drive in peace? Even the road was out to get me. I settled back into my seat and looked ahead once more. I was confused by what I saw, though. Something glowed green through the fog on the side of the road ahead. As I came closer, I saw that it was yet another gas station sign. One of its posts was bent so it was basically leaning over the road, and it read, Parker's One Stop. Another one? So close to the other? They couldn't even be 2 miles apart. Who had decided on that placement? As I passed the building, I could just make out someone standing in the window, waving at me. It gave me an eerie feeling, but I kept on driving, leaving the second gas station behind in the fog. It wasn't long before I slammed on the brakes for the third time that day, though. Once again, I pulled over as I felt the earth shake like mad. The aftershocks went on for a few seconds, growing in intensity at first, and then subsiding. What were the odds of 2 earthquakes so close together? Was I near a fault line or something? Shaking my head in confusion, I pulled onto the road once more. This had to be the strangest road trip I'd ever had, and to make it even weirder, all of the strangeness had taken place during the course of an hour. At that point, I was just waiting for the next earthquake, or the next gas station. My expectation didn't make the third appearance of Parker's One Stop any less surprising, however. As the sign came into view, and then the fuzzy dark shape of the building behind it a second later, I slowed to a stop in the middle of the road. I didn't put the car in park, and I didn't move. I just stared at the gas station with the glowing green sign, which was sitting right in front of me, on the road itself. Had I gone insane? Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? Was this a dream? If it wasn't, then Parker's One Stop was the most elaborate and seemingly pointless prank I had ever been a victim of. Why was there a gas station sitting in the middle of the road? I had to know. I slowly rolled up to the parking lot, but not into it. I was too nervous to get that close. I just watched the building. I could see someone moving around inside after a moment, and then they pushed the door open and stepped out. I didn't understand at all what I was seeing. It was the same young man from the first gas station, wearing the same green polo and the same cheerful smile. He looked directly at me and waved his hand, beckoning me toward him. No. Absolutely no. That was the limit. In fact, it was too much. I couldn't make heads nor tails of any of it, and I really didn't care to. I just wanted to get away, out of the suffocating fog which felt even thicker than it had all day. I immediately put the car in reverse and backed away from the gas station so I could turn around. But just then, the rumbling started again. My whole car shook back and forth, up and down, and then Parker's One Stop began to rise out of the ground. The concrete broke at the edge of the parking lot, and the whole thing just moved upward into the fog. I leaned over the steering wheel and looked up through the windshield to watch it, and what I saw horrified me beyond words. The underbelly of the floating gas station was not rock, or concrete, or dirt, but a pale red flesh, from which hung several gigantic swaying tentacles, and at the center of them was what looked like a mouth. The hole was filled with long yellow fangs which had to be at least 10 feet in length. They stuck out at odd angles and surrounded a squirming, deep red tongue, which dangled beneath the mouth, dripping huge globs of liquid into the crater beneath. My observations were cut short when what I can only assume was one of the thing's legs hit the road next to my car, punching a hole right through the pavement. It looked almost like a massive spider leg as it was covered in a near black, shiny armor, with stiff, thick hairs protruding from it. As the car shook once more from the impact, I spun the wheel around, put it in drive, and slammed my foot on the gas to speed away from the gigantic creature behind me. I had gained some distance and could no longer see it through the fog when I heard a sound like nothing I had ever heard before. It was a roar which sounded almost like a whale call, but much deeper and much, much more frightening. The car began to shake once every few seconds then, and I assumed Parker's one-stop was in pursuit. I was driving over 90 miles per hour, and I just hoped against hope that it wouldn't catch up. It roared again, this time more distant, and I felt that I might just be in the clear. I relaxed, but only slightly. I didn't let my foot off the pedal 1 inch. What was that sound? Was that the engine? I heard a faint hum which gradually grew louder and louder. It almost sounded like a helicopter. The buzzing reached a crescendo just before I felt a powerful shudder, which almost caused me to swerve off the road. The fog was beginning to clear up, and I could see a little further than before. Enough to see Parker's one-stop standing over the road, waiting for me, its bright green neon sign dangled in front of it as if I was a fish it was trying to lure. That had been the sound. It had flown. I didn't have time to think of a plan. I just yelled in fear as I sped right underneath it, and, a few seconds later, out of the fog. I didn't let up on the gas until I saw a pickup truck approaching from the opposite direction. I slammed on the brakes, jumped out of the car, and flagged it down. I was afraid he was going to think I was a lunatic. He came to a stop and warily cracked his window enough to hear what I had to say. I frantically begged, "The gas station is alive! It's in the fog! Turn around! Turn around!" Then I saw the look on his face verify what I feared. He thought I was crazy. He hastily rolled his window back up and drove right on past me. I watched him until he disappeared into the wall of cloud, and I swear I heard the faint roar of the thing that called itself Parker's one-stop.